Welcome to the hashtag CNF podcast number 13. This show is a first. The first with the best American sports writing representative. Fresh out of the 2015 volume, it's Greg Hanlon, the uber-talented reporter whose Sins of the Preacher made the big book, and his Many Crimes of Mel Hall piece made the notable selections. Now that is a hell of a run, which led him to use maybe the most perfect baseball analogy I have ever heard. So, I'm not going to wait any longer. Let's just get right to the podcast. 3, 2, 1, podcast.
Hey, Brendan, how's it going?
All right, Greg, how about yourself?
Good.
Good.
How's the sound and everything?
I think the sound is all right. Can you hear me just fine?
Yeah, I'm good.
Very
good.
Cool. Very nice. Well, thanks for carving out some time to do this. I understand that we're all very busy, and it's cool that you're able to carve out maybe 45 minutes to an hour here to just to talk shop. It should be exciting to talk about your work.
Sure. Yeah, well, I appreciate you having me on, and I'm flattered and humbled. That you reached out, and looking forward to.
Oh yeah, I mean I kind of feel the same way, kind of flattered and honored to even sort of like talk shop with someone who's you're really on top of your game with a lot of the work I've read from you recently, especially the two pieces, the Sins of the Preacher piece and the Crimes of Mel Hall, which both the Chad Curtis one in the anthology Best American Sports Writing, and the other one getting a notable selection. I mean, talk about what a great run that you're on right now with those pieces. They're just so gut punching and moving. I just want to first off say, like, just great work that you did. Well,
yeah, thank you for that. Often, as I sort of struggled this morning through a piece that I'm writing, I feel like 2014 was like my Brady Anderson 50 home runs in 1994.
It's a great reference. That was the big creatine year.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm sort of not feeling whatever magic pixie dust resulted in that. I'm struggling to kind of recapture that, but I guess that's the point, right? I mean, you struggle, and then kind of the end product. If you've struggled enough, hopefully kind of, comes close to your original expectations going in. So, it's all about the struggle as writer to writer, as I'm sure you're, 150% aware of.
Yeah, of course. Like, well, why don't you speak to that a little bit? Like, how gratifying is it to have your work sort of publicly acknowledged and recognized like that after putting in those years of struggle, the miles and miles of sentences, and of doing the work, doing good work, and then finally, getting that recognition that every artist and everyone doing this type of work, deep down really wants. But even though you're still doing the work, you want to get that recognition as well.
Sure. It felt great. It felt totally validating. It really did. It wasn't. I think kind of all of us sort of teeter on the edge of kind of crippling, insecurity, and sort of wonder what exactly it is we're spending our lives doing, and all the biting the nails and all the tearing at our hair and all the kind of anxiety that we put ourselves through to get, not that this is didn't make me rich and famous, and it wasn't a stadium full of people, chanting my name, not to sort of overstate the validation, but just kind of any token of job well done by the people that, consume this stuff. It really did feel great, and I'm very sort of humbled and grateful and honestly sort of lucky, feel very lucky for it. Mm-hmm. Not lucky as opposed to good, but there are a lot of people that are good, and there aren't as many people that are good and lucky. And I feel lucky to sort of count myself among the crowd that is had some luck here. However, kind of crazy this might sound to someone who's not one of us.
Yeah.
Stuff really seriously. It's just, yeah. I mean, it felt great. I'm sure, like most of us in this profession, validation is just hard to come by, and we're kind of just struggling, and it seems like the validation is not in proportion to the struggle, and to kind of have a couple moments there where the score seemed to be even, it felt great. And the way this one guy used to doing a book project on the '86 Giants a few years ago that I actually sort of aborted, and this guy was telling me about playing for Bill Parcells, and he said that I've always sort of taken this with me. He said that Parcells knew exactly, I mean, for as much of a ball buster and as tough as he was, he knew exactly the right moment where he had to say something to kind of build you up. And the way he described it is like, it would just be, he would just notice some little thing, and he would just have such a kind of finger on the pulse of all the sort of psychology, the mental state of his players, and he would just say this one little building up comment, and the way the guy described it was like, and he would just put gas in your tank, and that would keep you going for weeks. And that's kind of how I feel about these selections. It's like I kind of felt like I really needed it, and I'm grateful for having gotten that. And that doesn't mean that I'm not going to go years and years without any acknowledgement from this point forward, but it put gas in my tank.
That's great, because there is this, in any artistic pursuit, there's a real fine line between that talent point and like pure delusion. It's because you have to be delusional to the point to put yourself through it for 10, 15 years of little money, little recognition, and sometimes little validation, and some along those lines, like you're saying, that metaphor of putting the gas in the tank is so important to sort of temper and cut those thoughts that might be delusional, and it does keep you going and validates the pursuit. And I think that that line is real hard to define, and actually is undefinable, and you just kind of have to keep doing the work, and then hopefully you do get someone telling you one reason or the other, or becoming anthologized and just recognized for your work, and then you're on the right track and you're not delusional. You can keep continuing doing what it is you do.
Yeah, I really think you hit it on the head there, and I the delusion talent thing, I kind of think, and I think you were sort of alluding to this as well with the fine line. As much as they're kind of opposites to each other, they're sort of the same thing, because at the end of the day, a reader is going to want to occupy a writer that firmly 100% believes in themselves, and that's going to come across in the work. And I mean, the only way to fully 100% believe in yourself is if you have an ego, is if you are sort of capable of saying, here for the next 5,000 words, for the next 10,000 words, my voice is going to carry this. My voice is going to be the truth of this situation, and you're going to be in my voice, and you're going to benefit from that. I think that's a very sort of audacious thing that, it sort of runs counter to the stereotype of writers of guys like me and you being these, dudes that tear out our hair and are always sort of besieged by anxiety. I think we're sort of always teetering on that line of being besieged by anxiety.
Yep.
And this very very empowering, and not only empowering, but like coming from a place of empowerment, of, you know, controlling these narratives. And I think those are sort of the, I don't know, I mean, not to get too, like, stoner freshman year of college-y, but I think that that's sort of the dialectic that we're all sort of playing with, that you really hit upon with the talent delusion, you know, dichotomy, I guess. You know, the marriage of the opposites of the talent and the delusion.
Yeah.
That's kind of what we're all, you know, wrestling with.
So how did you get to the point where you feel confident in your written voice on the page, and confident to the extent that you're able to do the type of work you're doing? That takes it's a rare talent that just pops out of someone's head. I wonder, like, how long do you feel it took you to reach a point of narrative confidence?
Yeah, well, I would qualify that and say that it sort of, you know, comes and goes. Like, you know, this 2014 was my, you know, Daniel Murphy in the October of 2015. You know, I mean, the stuff, it's kind of like, it's like anything, it's anything elusive, it kind of comes and goes. So I wouldn't kind of put myself at a point where, you know, I sort of know that it's going to be there. But I guess as we were discussing early, I mean, if you put in the work, putting in the work alone, it kind of is itself confidence building, because it sort of strips away, you know, kind of, you're not flat-footed when you're putting in, like, I mean, if you sort of put your head down and you say, I'm going to bang out, you know, however many words, and there's no excuse not to, even if the words suck, which is often the case, it helps, you know, as with anything, to sort of be moving forward and not just kind of to be standing there flat-footed and besieged by your own, you know, anxieties. Something that really helped me that I didn't really think was helping me at the time was working for a community newspaper as really kind of my first journalism job, covering really rinky-dink stuff that, you know, I wasn't into at all. And having to write, you know, we wrote about 10 to 12 stories a week that were, you know, pretty thorough stories, like 800 words, like real, you know, multiple source reported articles. It was hellacious, and the whole time, you know, my expectations for myself were very high on that, you know, for, like, I think sort of for all of us, we like treasure everything that we put our name to. It's important.
Yeah, you didn't mail it in.
Yeah, so I didn't mail it in, and it was really, like, hard, like, consequently. Like, you know, I mean, every single one of those 10 articles, I was, you know, I was pulling out my hair. But it kind of got me over the hump of, like, of being afraid of putting thought to paper. And that was sort of huge for me. Because I think a lot of writers, or actually a lot of would-be writers, that sit there and sort of fantasize about how great it could be, and kind of getting over the psychological hurdle of, like, you know, of your own expectations, and just sort of getting into kind of more of a practical mindset where it's like, you gotta, you know, you're going to do it because you have to, and if you don't do it, you're going to get fired, you're going to be broke. Right. I think that was something that I'm just grateful for that experience, as bad as it was. I mean, I guess what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, I think.
So what is your first hour to 90 minutes of your day look like, especially when you're in the throes of reporting something long? Like, what is you know, how do you sort of warm up? What do those writing calisthenics look like? And how do you sort of, because we allude to you just flat out doing the work, a lot of times that just comes from sheer repetition of a morning routine. And maybe you have one, maybe you don't, but I'd be interested to hear how you sort of get into the mode.
Yeah, so I did, I did when I was freelancing full time. Now I'm working full time. So the last 2 or 3 months of my life, I've really kind of been behind on this sort of one very important freelance project that I have, very important to me. Freelance project that I have. Kind of when I was in my groove, definitely the morning. I mean, I think that's sort of not a universal, but a very common thing among writers, that you kind of want to get those sort of unspoiled first, whatever it is, 60 or 90 minutes.
Yeah.
I usually worked in terms of word counts, just as any kind of benchmark. And when I was in my groove, which I'm sort of trying to get back into now, I'm not really. It was 500 to 750, in a day. So I'd sort of start in the morning, and then I kind of have sort of stray thoughts of things that I was kind of working on, and sort of throughout the day I would kind of go back and fill the stuff in. And again, I mean, just sort of having something on paper spares you from the blank page, which is a repository for anxiety and nightmare, and which is a reflection of your ineffectuality.
The blank page is a taunt.
Yeah, exactly. So it sounds a little sort of straightforward and crude, but just a word limit and hitting it, and just in the act of hitting it, having, even if terrible, having sort of some feeling of accomplishment, and some kind of forward motion.
Yeah, it's like what Anne Lamott says in Bird by Bird, and the very title of that book is, she got that from her little brother or older brother. I can't remember where her brother is in her own chronology, but he had to memorize a bunch of birds, and he didn't know where to start, and their father just told him, just start memorizing bird by bird. And it's that simple. It's just do your 500 to 750 words, and you knock that off. But at the end of the week, I'm bad at math, but I mean, if you do that every single day, I mean, you're about 3,500 words, which is sort of unthinkable in one sitting. But when you do it a little bit every day, wow, in just 7 days you've done it. So
yeah, and I think that to go back to the bird by bird thing, like small nuggets of accomplishment, put gas in your tank for the next accomplishment. So it's all about how you think about it. If you think about it as memorizing, 50,000 ornithological species, that's a daunting, impossible task. Break it up into doable things, then you're energized by accomplishing things by accomplishing your goals.
It's great that you dropped ornithology on the phone. I love it. I took an ornithology course. I studied biology too in college. In one of the hard.
Okay. Yeah.
So as a result, I know a lot of mind-numbing minutia about birds and orders and all sorts of.
And then you're living with regret about being a writer and not banking money in some lab.
Exactly. I tried. I equate it to. I added journalism in my last year. I stayed an extra year at UMass. I was on the 5-year plan. I'd finished bio, and I had tried sort of the pre-med route, the animal biology route, and the sort of molecular bio route. And I just, every single time, it was like the episode of Seinfeld where George keeps ordering pesto, and he's like, why do I keep ordering pesto? I know I don't like pesto. And that's the same thing. I kept trying. I was ordering biology up front because I was just good at it in high school, so I just majored in it. And every single time, I'm force-feeding myself this subject, and I just can't do it. And
it's funny that, so you were sort of playing with, like, practical versus what I want to do, and you kind of kept on trying to make the practical thing work.
Yeah.
And,
exactly.
At the end of the day, your heart won out over your head.
It did, despite my father trying to totally dissuade me or even keep me from doing that, because it didn't make any sense to him. This guy was an English teacher, so you'd think it would have made sense, but...
Hey, well, no, I mean, let's, takes one to know one, right? I mean, there's no one who knows how useless and impractical this stuff is more than people like us. You know?
Exactly, which is the big reason why I started the podcast, was to talk to people about this kind of thing. And, it's not unique in and of itself, because there's long form and Gangry and all the other ones, but I think it's good to hear people talk about their struggles and doing the work, and for me it's just fun just to talk shop with people whose work I admire. And
totally. And I mean, you talked about the like the Livingston thing and the Best American. I mean, those are sort of glorified versions of this type of thing. It's a community of writers, coming together to acknowledge all the hard work that people are doing.
Yeah.
And I think that's very valuable, and like our our support group, as it were,
yeah,
is not to be taken for granted, and it's a good thing. So I appreciate everything you're doing.
Cool. Well, what has to be in place for you to pursue a story? What are some of the checks in your checklist that you were like, all right, these things are in place, I'm going to go pursue this Chad Curtis story, this Mel Hall story, or whatever you're working on now, or the Marv Levy story? What has to be in place for you?
Really, really good question. An editor saying yes and offering me some nominal sum of money. That's a really good question. What am I into in a story, basically, is the question.
Yeah.
I kind of like stuff with sort of probing psychological elements. I'm much more into how, like, people work than how, like, things work and or systems work,
Mm-hmm.
And I guess if I have an empathy with the people involved, like even the Marv Levy thing, like he's at one, phase of his life, and I'm at, nearly the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, Marv was great because he's such a sort of emotionally connected dude.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of the aspect. Like, I'm sort of into what makes people tick, I guess, for lack of a better expression. And if I can if that could sort of be my, if that's sort of the bulk of what's interesting about the piece, then I'm interested in it.
Yeah, there's with the Curtis and the Hall piece too. You're dealing with pure hubris too with these guys, and I'm sure that even their acts, as reprehensible as they are, there's in their own minds they've justified their rightness in it somehow, and it's amazing. Like, I wonder, like, how did you flesh that out, and how hard was I might be imposing to me, I don't think I could do it, because it was just, the subject matter is so hard and sensitive. How did you power through that reporting and get to the real crux of all those stories? Right. It's just a monumental feat of reporting, and I wonder how you went about it.
Very, very good question, and it sort of plays into what I was saying before with the what makes people tick stuff. Mm-hmm. And I would say that with the Hall and Curtis pieces, I sort of approached them more from the perspective of the victims.
Mm-hmm.
And just sort of the confusion, and the terror that they must have been going through. I think to the extent that I identified with people in the story, it was not sort of based on personal experience, but the kind of how, to answer the question of how this stuff happened, it was more compelling to me to put myself in the shoes of the victims, as opposed to, what makes this evil guy tick. I think I think I got to the latter question by answering the former question.
Did that grind away at you at all? Trying to be that empathic with something that's so mentally traumatic to these victims and these stories? Like, how did that affect you in the process of reporting?
It didn't, and I think I was fortunate in, well, the Curtis thing. I never talked to the victims. I just sort of read through their court testimony, which is extremely powerful.
Yeah.
And I think it didn't, because sort of to get to the point, whether you're talking to me or whether you're testifying in court, it was very sort of cathartic and empowering for those people that do that. And so it was kind of, for that reason, it was kind of triumphant. And it was sort of their, in the courtroom, it was their first sort of moment of turning the tables. And for that reason, it wasn't like I was sort of trying to draw things out of people that were sort of too traumatized to even go near it. Mm-hmm. So there was an element of triumph.
Yeah.
And that certainly held true for the Hall thing. And the women that I talked to, this stuff happened in one case like 25 years ago, and in a couple of more 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And
so some of that distance kind of... Oh, I'm sorry. I guess some of that distance kind of made it a little bit easier for them to maybe talk about it. It wasn't quite as fresh.
I think that's exactly... that's exactly where I was going. Like the distance made it sort of something to talk about and chew over and to explore, which I think was a really good experience for. I would like to think was a really good experience for them, and something that they are happy that they did. Mm-hmm. And so from that perspective, it sort of wasn't. It's not like we got off the phone and both of us started crying. Like I think, it was a lot of sort of worthwhile. Chewing over that stuff. So.
Yeah. Did you get us? Yeah, I'm sorry. Go on.
It wasn't sort of that. I know kind of when it's written, when you're sort of encountering the stuff for the first time, it's a lot of horrifying stuff. But working on something like that for weeks or months or whatever, you kind of get by the horrifying stuff so that it's not like it's not horrifying anew anymore, and you are at a level of discussing it, with some level of perspective, in a sense that things have worked out okay, and that these people have moved on.
Right. Did you get a sense that you were writing really important pieces? Because exposing and telling their stories, I get a sense too from your stories too that they came forward as much to protect others as they were to just get their own story out and to get these sort of monsters behind bars. Did you get a sense too that you were playing a big part too to shed light on these people who use their bigger than life personas to get away with whatever they want to get away with?
That I was not unaware of that sort of being the goal. Mm-hmm. But I feel sort of personally like I don't have much of a kind of, if I sort of approach it from the perspective of I'm going to sort of make a political statement and do something to bring about social justice, mm-hmm. it's gonna kind of lose the kind of, personal from the inside out type of thing that I think makes my work effective.
Yeah.
And so, I was not unaware of, of kind of doing something that had some socially, redeeming value. But I felt that if I sort of hewed to the, to the sort of personal stuff and dealt with that with integrity, that it would, if I was lucky, it would sort of follow and it would have sort of broader applications. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it does. And that was kind of a question I had too, because I wondered if you had sort of your antenna might be tuned to like pieces that might reflect some sort of hole in the social fabric that you're trying to like spackle over and trying to not fix but shed light on. But it sounds like you find that you find some personal stories that really are these beating hearts of these narratives, and in so doing, through that, if they happen to strike some sort of social justice chord, then so be it. But it's kind of like not the go-to hook. It's sort of an incidental thing with the work you're doing.
Yes, I think I 90%. I think that's an accurate summation. But I do feel that a lot of sort of interpersonal things, or every interpersonal thing, is sort of informed by the larger cultural zeitgeist, and if you can kind of make that those connections exist. But for me, I find them more by focusing on sort of the ground level of the interpersonal exchanges, as opposed to, as the kind of more, I don't know, top down, like let's address the societal. I find the societal. I mean, like the Mel Hall story, for instance. I mean, that was about power and money and fame, kind of as much as anything. But I kind of wouldn't have thought of that before I got deep into the reporting.
Right.
And so I didn't come to it with, and I think sort of all exchanges between all people are informed by the social, circumstances and the social context of the people in them. It's just, for me, I find that from the ground up, as opposed to from the other way around.
Well, yeah, you have to let the reporting sort of dictate what the story means. You can't sort of inject what you want it to mean. It'll just it'll surface organically what the story will be about over time when you spend enough time with a subject, for sure.
Sure.
So how did you come to those stories? What drew you to them, and then what allowed you at that point to then really sort of just do this full-on swan dive and get into it?
Yeah. So well, one important thing was that I was working full time, so at a community development nonprofit. That was my day job. Just sort of having stability allows you to look at projects and say, okay, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to spend as much time on it as I need to spend on it. And it sort of takes you out of, thinking of these things, as economic necessities.
Yeah.
And it gives you a great luxury of doing the story as, with the integrity that you want to do it with. So that was a big thing. I had done a story before the Curtis piece, a few months before that. I had done a story for Glenn Stout on for SB Nation on David Leggett, who's one of my favorite players when I was a kid. And he's, I don't know, are you a football guy, Brennan?
Yeah, I love football.
So you know Meggett.
Yeah, he played for the Patriots for a little bit, didn't he?
Patriots and the Giants, yeah.
Okay.
And he was this sort of little cute Mighty Mouse character, and just this sort of kick returner, punt returner, third down back guy, and just a really dynamic, likable player. Just all sorts of moves and tough for his size, and just a really kind of sound, fundamental, winning player. And I knew that he had gotten in trouble with women before, or not before, subsequent to his career. And I sort of had it in my mind as I was sort of like looking for stories like, oh yeah, what happened to Dave Meggett? He got, he screwed up. He did something with women or something. And then the more I looked into it, I was kind of disturbed. It turns out the guy was no exaggeration, was a serial, like brutal serial rapist.
Ugh.
And I was kind of disturbed by my own sort of casual assessment of what happened to him. That I kind of looked at it like he screwed up,
Mm-hmm.
got in trouble, and I didn't sort of comprehend the full human tragedy of what had gone on here. And that sort of led me to the conclusion that to the extent that this has been covered, which it had, it sort of had been in very brief AP articles, it hadn't been covered in any kind of meaningful way.
Mm-hmm.
And it sort of led me to the idea that if you bring out these stories, they're about, there's just so much more than what people are taking away from it, which is what I took away from it. It's like, oh, that guy screwed up.
Yeah.
That guy got himself in trouble. And it's just a ridiculous way to look at something like that, obviously. And so I think what sort of informed my reporting on that Meggett story was the fact that the way my takeaway from it, from kind of what had been previously known, was just so off. So anyway, I wrote that Meggett story, and it was great to work with Glenn Stout. And he's like the guru. He's just it's kind of like dealing with a kindred spirit in terms of like, I'd never had an editor that spent so much time
Mm-hmm.
all and sort of spent so much effort and was just sort of so kind of sincerely trying to get on your narrative wavelength.
Yeah.
And just really kind of earnestly helping you along as opposed to, make me feel like a schmuck for including a digressive paragraph or correcting your grammar or not correcting your grammar.
Yeah.
Or inserting their own grammatical errors.
Yeah.
And it was just a really kind of, really eye-opening and just tremendous, like, growth experience, and also very validating to kind of have, my reporting and my writing be taken that seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And the story, I thought, went very well, and it, it got a lot of, for an hour on Twitter there, people were into it, and
Yeah.
and that was validating. And after that, I think the Curtis thing followed after that, because I sort of realized that I had done something with the Meggett that I really enjoyed, that I sort of wanted to do again and do a little better. And I think kind of having that sort of a similar, the sexual predator model, that was sort of on my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to kind of stay in that lane allowed me to sort of feel like I could grow in other ways with regards to the, with regards to the reporting and just the presentation and just sort of how I wrote the pieces. And so I did the Curtis one, and I thought that went very well. And then, a lot of this is, as you know, you go where the work takes you.
Yeah.
And so to some degree this is opportunity, but I do feel like kind of staying with similar subject matter was what they call like a liberating constraint. Like if you're kind of, dealing with similar stuff, you can kind of experiment and do it, and it gives you a little more freedom. Ironically, if you're, if you have some kind of repetition of stuff that that you've already done well before,
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I kind of liken it to, I think, having certain structure formats actually kind of frees you up, like you were saying. Like it's sort of like a coloring book. You've got the lines to color in, but you can choose the color. So within that framework, you can then, those boundaries allow you to just be creative within those boundaries. So I think there's some truth to a lot of truth to what you're saying in that sense. And like the structure it's weird. Structure can free you in that sense.
Absolutely.
I think a lot of people read for structure. They don't necessarily they read for voice, but I think there's just something like something resonant. We need not only the story, but the story has to sort of fall into a certain sequence for it to really just have an impact. And as long as you kind of adhere to that, you can almost do anything, so long as you're within that, within those boundaries, as you said.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, just the way you put it, I thought was just now was really good. You can do anything if you're within those boundaries. That's a lot easier to deal with than you can do anything.
Yeah.
Which is terrifying.
Yeah.
So I think you hit it on the head there.
Well, what are, like, right now, there's kind of like changing gears a little bit. What are, like, 5 of your favorite books? Like, what are your books that you cannot part with? If you had to throw out however many books you have, but you had to keep 5, what would those books be?
Okay, I think this is going to be a non-exhaustive, because then I'm not going to, kind of in the spirit of what we were talking about before, I'm not going to worry about the whole universe of books. I'm just going to pick 5 and say screw it.
Yeah.
So one of my all-time favorite sports books, might be my favorite sports book, is Bringing the Heat by Mark Bowden.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a fly-on-the-wall account of the 1993 Philadelphia Eagles.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of a failed project, because you could tell that that Bowden is the guy, the Black Hawk Down, and, he's done a ton of stuff. You could tell that he really wanted, and he sort of was banking on the Eagles winning the Super Bowl, and that being, the greatest football book ever written.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't win the Super Bowl. It's still the greatest football book ever written. It's just that not nearly as many people know about it as they otherwise would have.
Mm-hmm.
It's just remarkably detailed reporting, just really capturing the emotional essence of these guys. It's kind of both. You talk about the world of pro athletes. It's like both empathic and contemptuous.
Mm-hmm.
Like he talks about sort of all the affairs that these guys are having, and it's not glorifying it. It sort of puts you exactly sort of in the head of these guys, where it's like that's just sort of the culture, the ridiculous culture that they live in. Just a tremendous book, and in terms of the sports stuff, just sort of a real. I mean, everything about it. I'm not babbling here, but like the kind of treatment of the sports and society, and just sort of what sports mean to a city, and the treatment of the media. It's just sort of a grand kind of opus of, the whole world that is contained in a professional football team.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll say that's one. And here I am, just like literally looking at my bookshelf. The Fortress of Solitude is another one of my favorite books, Jonathan Lethem. That's set in Brooklyn in the 70s. It's a little kind of before my time, but I grew up in Manhattan in the 80s. So,
mm-hmm.
Kind of distinct, but just sort of a real kind of like tactile, emotionally correct portrait of growing up and childhood, and also of New York City, of gentrification, of racial tension, of kind of interpersonal racial politics. I mean, just a remarkable writer, just like sort of tons of insight. I mean, that's one that I kind of find myself like getting up, and I can sort of pick up and read 2 pages and kind of feel like I've gotten more out of that than
Mm-hmm.
than I have by however many news articles. What else? Angel.
Mm-hmm.
Is one of my sports writing idols. Just the voice and just the kind of rhythm and just kind of the, both kind of the flow of his voice and the choices that he makes when he kind of deviates from the flow. I mean, just deviates from the flow of his voice. All the word choices that just kind of stop you in your tracks and take you down a hole of like deep appreciation of both his writing and the sport of baseball.
Mm-hmm.
I've always just such a pleasure to read. Like, never another one that you can read something that you read a year ago and kind of glean new insights from. Grew up kind of a big Philip Roth fan.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know which of those. Is the best. I mean, I read The Plot Against America relatively recently. American Pastoral. I guess The Human Stain. Just the kind of rhetorical power and kind of how the characters kind of make these speeches that last for pages, and they're just so readable.
Yeah.
It's kind of the sharp articulation and the rhetorical force behind people's inner thoughts, and just kind of like the rhetorical dialectic that we're all kind of in. That was a really poor way of putting it. Just like Philip Roth, but yeah, I mean, just tremendous fan of his. And another one, there's a guy named Josh Wilker, who had this blog, and he still posts on it occasionally. It's called cardboardgods.net.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't recommend this guy enough. Basically, the premise of the blog was he took a baseball card from, this guy's maybe like 45 years old, 46, and he takes a baseball card from his childhood and just kind of riffs off of that for, 800, 1,500, 2,000 words.
Huh.
And it's memoir kind of based on that baseball card.
Wow.
So it's all pegged. And so there's an inherent humor to it, because, like, it'll be like some 70s baseball dude with, like, like a perm and, like ridiculous beard. And he'll sort of begin with that, but get into his, just talking. I mean, there's nothing that amazing or noteworthy about his life, but just kind of the emotional honesty and the humor that comes through. He wrote a book, which is kind of a compilation of his blog posts, and it's called Cardboard Gods. And I think kind of the driving emotional force behind that is as is indicated in the title of calling these guys gods, kind of what are we looking for, like, spiritually and emotionally from sports. And I think kind of the humor in showing some ridiculous looking dude in the 70s and calling him a god sort of underscores the whole absurdity of the sports fan enterprise, which is something that I think about all the time, because I'm a rabid fan whose emotional state is tethered to these people that have absolutely nothing in common with and couldn't care less about me. And I think sort of the whole tone, there's a lot of self-deprecation, bordering on kind of self-loathing. But it's beautiful prose. It's emotionally honest prose, and it's both poignant and hilarious. So he wrote this memoir about 5 years ago. It's called Cardboard Gods, and he also a year or so ago he wrote a book about his about having a kid for the first time, and it's called Benchwarmer, and it's really great because it's sort of kind of continuing this theme of being a fan versus being an active participant.
Mm-hmm.
And when he has a kid, he becomes kicking and screaming, like the baby itself, kicking and screaming, dragging his feet into the world, into the arena itself, and he no longer sort of has the comfort of that distance. And it's just really beautiful, intelligent, emotionally honest, and just emotionally on point prose, and just totally readable. So I guess that would be. I can't recommend this guy enough. I think he should get a lot more accolades.
Cool.
But he's on the internet. He's been written up by a lot of great places, and I recommend this guy wholeheartedly.
Yeah, I'll have to check out all the his work for sure, and a couple of the others you mentioned. Do you have a favorite documentary?
Yes, The Thin Blue Line.
Okay.
The Errol Morris, murder, mystery, I guess, in 1976. That's, we talked sort of earlier about kind of taking on social issues kind of from the inside out, and not starting the documentary by saying that, prosecutors can be overzealous. Here's an example, but rather just sort of building the story out with these totally unlikely, compelling characters. The drifter who gets accused of murder winds up being this just sort of very dignified, intelligent, very well-spoken, it's kind of a resting screen presence. And I think that's a tribute to Morris's, it's a tribute to the guys, obviously, first of all, but just kind of, Morris's sort of minimalistic touch. I'd say that's my favorite. Although, we as long-form dudes, we love our documentaries.
Yeah, I know. What do you have a different kind of other kinds of movie that you rewatch the most? Or what movie do you rewatch the most?
Yeah, I go through sort of phases with these things. I'm not in one right now. I love Woody Allen movies. I guess from the ages of 9 through 14, I probably watched Major League,
Yeah.
170 times. No, I'm not that big of a movie guy. I mean, I have kind of my go-tos that I've seen a million times that I sort of find myself thinking about at odd times in different ways. Bull Durham is probably, what's your favorite movie? That's the one I mentioned. Just kind of I was a Division III college baseball player, which I always tell people, that's the farthest level of the sport you can get to if you're, not an athlete, but just, a kid who likes baseball.
Yeah.
And so it just sort of the love of the game and the meaningfulness of the game, as opposed to the God-given athletic talent for the game, is something they, sort of at the heart of Bull Durham, and just sort of the spirituality of the game. Any movie that begins with, I believe, with the line Susan Sarandon saying, "I believe in the Church of Baseball."
Yeah.
You have me at that. So.
Yeah. And since you don't rewatch a ton of movies, are there any? Is there a book you reread the most, or are you in the camp that there's too much to read out there, so I don't have time to reread?
Oh no, I'm of the camp of there's too much to read out there, so don't bother trying to cross things off your list, and just read sort of what you feel will give your meaning.
Yeah, that's how I feel. I read Gatsby every year, usually around December. For whatever reason, I pick December. I just pick 2 days and I read it. It's So I wonder if
that sounds like a great ritual. That sounds like a great ritual. Yeah, I mean, I think to a degree these things are sort of, I'm sure I would derive a ton of meaning from doing that, from doing what you're doing. I mean, a book that I keep rereading. Bring the Heat. I mean, that's sort of instantly, the insights are infinitely, fresh and interesting for me. can sort of, if I haven't read it in 10 years, I'll pick it up and I'll sort of find myself, 20 pages into it before I look up. Firm believer in rereading. I mean, because that's sort of the point of, in this day and age, like the value that reading has over other, forms of media is that you can go back to it and get as much out of it as you did the first time. And I don't think that's true with anything else.
Yeah. Yeah, because even though the book remains the same, it's like we change around the book. So like and so you can always glean more meaning out of things, depending on how old you are. Like this woman I had on the podcast last time, Sarah Einstein, who wrote a great memoir titled Mott. She was given Jane Eyre when she was 9 years old, and like that's one of the books she rereads all the time. And as she grew up, she identified with different characters at different ages in her life. So the book it's been written, it was written however long ago, 150 years ago, I don't know. And it still changes with her as she ages. So it's like one of the beauties of being able to reread something is that it as static as it is, it's actually kind of alive. Totally.
It's a beautiful story. I love that. That's great.
And how do you feel? Do you use a tape recorder when you do your recording and your reporting and interviews? Or are you a notebook guy?
Usually not. Well, usually it's on the phone, and I'm just sort of I'm kind of waiting. I'm either sort of typing as they speak, or you're kind of half typing as they speak and half waiting for them to say something that that is interesting or that that you're going to use. That's obviously when you go somewhere it's tape recorder. No, but I mean I couldn't keep up with longhand. I don't know how those guys did it back in the day. Other than they made up a lot of stuff, I'm sure.
I think even the greatest practitioners of it, I think there were many holes and they patched it in with their own spackle, and
exactly.
And that was accepted. I for one, I wish I didn't have to use a recorder, but I just do. I need it as a catch-all, like a fishing boat, a tow net catching tuna. You're gonna catch a few dolphins. You're gonna catch a few things you don't want in there. But I'd rather have the liberty to throw the stuff out and then keep what's good instead of like missing stuff, or I can't read my penmanship because I'm scribbling too fast.
Right, and also it forces you to go back to the interview, and you might pick up stuff that you didn't the first time around.
Yeah, exactly. I always I hear stuff again. I'm like, geez, how did I not even hear that? And how did I not even follow up on that? And then you just find these nuggets here and there. And also you can always play it back to someone if they said I didn't say that. Well, here right. You said it right here.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also just sort of frees you up to have a normal conversation and not sort of be doing the thing. Where you're sort of underscoring the transactionality of the whole exchange. So I think that's it's nice to talk to someone for real and not extract quotes from them.
Yeah, it can it can be a little intrusive having the device out, but I think once you get to a certain point, you almost you forget it's there. And but yeah, there's definitely two camps, and I think more people use recorders now than before. It's just but there's definitely the people who don't use it are like adamant about it, like John McPhee or someone like that. But then you get like John Krakauer on the other end. It's just like, I don't trust myself to take longhand notes because inevitably you fill in those holes with your own voice, not their voice.
Sure. And who wants to worry about keeping up with the speed of your hand? I mean, that's
yeah. On the worst is you miss something, or you got something great in your notebook and you can't read your handwriting. And
right.
Oh, it's the worst.
Right. Yeah, I think sort of to go back to some of the stuff we were talking about earlier, it kind of dovetails with with which methods you're using. I kind of would like to. Ideally, and in reality, I'm not this way, but ideally, I like to think of myself as like a Cal Ripken, how he always changed his batting stance.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think that's sort of a great lesson from baseball, is that the guy who is sort of known as the ultimate punch-the-clock dude is also the guy that was always tinkering with his stance.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that kind of says it all. Like, show up ready to work, but on any given day, it's like whatever works, man.
Yeah.
And I think, not that I practice that. I get locked into things. I don't show up every day, but I think that's sort of a good, inspiring model that sort of shows you that, the spirit with which we're all trying to commune with is elusive, and you just show up and do your best every day.
Well, I think that is a perfect place to end our conversation for this. This has been great getting to talk shop with you and talk about your wonderful work.
A pleasure.
And we'll have to do a part 2 again when something else of yours comes out, or we'll just talk about some other stuff that crops
great.
up in the world.
Or we'll get together in how much longer are you going to be in Raleigh?
Good question. It depends on where. We're looking for apartments now. We're not. If we can't find a good enough place, like a decent place that's on a good train line for my wife, we might just default and stay at River Place.
Okay.
We're gonna try to negotiate a lower rent if we can.
Sure.
But we'll see. Yeah, we might have to hit up the waiting room for an in-person
Absolutely.
beer.
Absolutely. Yeah, that sounds like a plan. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, thanks a lot, Greg.
Really.
Yeah, take care.
Appreciate everything.
You got it. Take care.
Take care, Brennan. Bye.
That was a good one. What a great guest Greg was. And you can find him on Twitter at Greg Hanlon. I forgot to ask him where people can find him on the internet, and I know for sure that's where you can find him. Also, you can find me at Brendan O'Mara. And be sure to give the podcast a subscribe, and maybe even subscribe to the email newsletter over at my website, BrendanO'Mara.com. All it does is send you latest blog posts every Tuesday in the event that I post anything. No posts, no email once a week. It's pretty simple. If you like the podcast, share with a friend. You get the idea. Anyways, thanks for listening. More to come in the future. As always, I never know when. But there will be more. Thanks again.